The room went quiet the moment she laughed. Not the soft kind of laugh, the sharp one that slices through a moment and leaves silence bleeding behind it. I felt every eye turn toward me, waiting to see if I would shrink or snap. Instead, I smiled. Before we begin, if you enjoy slow burn stories about hidden truths, quiet strength, and unexpected revenge, take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell icon so you don't miss what comes next. Trust me, this story only gets deeper from here. My name is Eleanor, and for most of my life, I believed that if I worked quietly, loved honestly, and gave generously, people would eventually see my worth. I didn't grow up with much, but I grew up learning how to make things with my hands. Quilts, knitted scarves, hand-bound journals, little wooden boxes carved late at night after work. It wasn't a hobby to me, it was how I showed love when words felt too small. That's why the gift mattered. The dinner was supposed to be a celebration. A long oak table stretched across my sister-in-law's dining room, candles flickering, wine glasses clinking, laughter floating between conversations that overlapped just enough to feel warm. This was their annual family gathering, the kind where people dressed a little nicer than usual and pretended old tensions had softened with time. I had spent weeks on the gift. Late nights, careful stitching, choosing every detail with intention. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't expensive, but it carried something no store could sell: time, care, and memory woven into every inch. When it was my turn, I stood, smoothed my hands against my dress, and placed the gift in front of her. She unwrapped it slowly, eyes scanning the room before even looking down, and then she laughed. "Oh," she said, lifting it with 2 fingers. "This is cute." The word landed wrong. Someone chuckled politely, someone else looked down at their plate. She tilted her head, examining it like something found at the bottom of a clearance bin. "I mean," she continued, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I guess handmade things are sweet, but this feels a little cheap, don't you think?" The silence that followed was heavy, thick, uncomfortable. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but my face stayed calm. I smiled, not because I wasn't hurt, but because I was thinking, watching, listening. She didn't know what she had just done. What no one at that table knew was that for the past 18 years, I had been the quiet backbone of this family's future. While they were busy keeping score of appearances and status, I had been planning, saving, sacrificing. Her daughter, bright, ambitious, and full of dreams, was going to college next year, a top school, expensive, prestigious, and every single dollar of that college fund came from me. Not from her mother, not from her father, from me. I never asked for credit, never wanted praise. I believed support was something you gave without conditions. I worked overtime shifts, skipped vacations, lived below my means, and funneled money into that fund month after month because I believed in her future, because I believed kindness returned itself in quiet ways. But that night, as the laughter faded and conversations slowly restarted, something inside me shifted. She had mistaken my silence for weakness. I sat back down, folded my napkin, and continued the evening as if nothing had happened. I laughed at the right moments. I complimented the food. I listened as she talked about brands, connections, and how it's important to teach kids standards. All the while, I was remembering moments she didn't think mattered. The way she had once forgotten to invite me to a family trip. The jokes about my job. The subtle reminders that I was tolerated, not valued. This wasn't about a gift. It never was. Later that night, as I drove home, the city lights blurred past my windshield, and I realized something uncomfortable but freeing. Generosity without respect becomes permission for disrespect, and I was done giving permission. I didn't cry, I didn't rant, I didn't call anyone. I simply made a decision. The college fund wasn't a contract, it was trust. And trust, once broken, doesn't come with refunds, it comes with consequences. Over the next few days, I watched her closely, how she smiled when she wanted something, how she spoke when she thought she was above someone, how she never once reached out to apologize, clarify, or even acknowledge what she had done. That told me everything I needed to know. I met her daughter for coffee that weekend, not to confront, not to accuse, just to listen. She talked about her dreams, her fears, how excited she was about the future. She thanked me for always believing in her. I smiled again, because the truth was, I still did, but belief doesn't mean blind sacrifice. As I walked home afterward, phone buzzing with a message from her mother about another upcoming family event, I realized the real secret wasn't the money. The real secret was this: I had always been invisible to them, and invisible people have the power to move quietly. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, opened my planner, and began mapping out a different future, one where my generosity had boundaries, one where respect wasn't optional, one where my silence would finally speak louder than their laughter. I smiled at that table, but what came next would not feel cheap at all. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm, the house still wrapped in that quiet hour before the world decides what kind of day it will be. I made coffee, sat by the window, and watched the sun slowly crawl across the rooftops. There was no anger in me anymore, just clarity, the kind that settles after a long confusion finally ends. People often think revenge is loud, explosive, something that announces itself, but the most effective kind is quiet, planned, and rooted in truth. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was trying to stop being used. The first thing I did was stop answering messages immediately. Not ignoring, just delaying. It's amazing how quickly people reveal their expectations when you no longer jump on command. My sister-in-law noticed within days. Her texts shifted from casual to impatient, then back to sweet again, like a switch flipping whenever it suited her. She invited me to lunch the following week. I already knew why. We sat across from each other at a little cafe she loved, the kind with minimalist decor and overpriced salads. She talked first, as always, about how busy she was, how stressed her daughter felt about applications, how proud she was of everything they had done to support her future. I listened, stirred my drink, waited. Finally, she leaned back and smiled, that same practiced smile from the dinner table. "You know," she said lightly, "college expenses are getting crazy these days. Scholarships don't cover everything. It's such a burden on families." I met her eyes, calm and steady. "It is," I said. There was a pause. She expected more. Gratitude, assurance, something that made her feel safe. Instead, I asked, "Do you remember what you said about my gift?" Her smile flickered, just for a second. "Oh, that?" she laughed. "I was joking. You know how I am." I nodded. "I do." Another pause, longer this time. She shifted in her chair. "Why bring that up now?" "Because it showed me something about how you see me." Her tone tightened. "You're being sensitive." And there it was, the dismissal, the pattern. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply said, "I value respect, and I don't give my time or energy where it isn't returned." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What are you saying?" "I'm answering," I answered evenly, "that some things are changing." She leaned forward. "You wouldn't punish my daughter over a misunderstanding." Punish. That word told me everything. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm choosing differently. Her voice sharpened. "You promised." "I supported," I corrected, "out of love, not obligation." We left the cafe shortly after that. No resolution, no raised voices, just tension hanging in the air like humidity before a storm. Over the next few weeks, the pressure increased. Calls, messages, subtle guilt. Not once did she apologize. Not once did she ask how I felt. Everything circled back to what they might lose. And that's when I understood the real betrayal. It wasn't the insult. It wasn't the laughter. It was the assumption that my kindness was permanent and unconditional regardless of how I was treated. At night, I thought about all the moments I had swallowed discomfort to keep peace. The birthdays where I brought thoughtful gifts and received barely a nod. The holidays where my contributions went unacknowledged. The quiet way I had been written into the background of their lives while carrying weight they never saw. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. The decision became solid. I scheduled a meeting with her daughter again. This time I was honest, not cruel, not dramatic, just clear. I told her how much I believed in her, how proud I was, and how important it was for her to know that her future should never depend on someone being disrespected. She cried. She didn't beg, she didn't blame. She listened. And in that moment, I felt peace. Because revenge doesn't have to destroy innocence to make a point. Word traveled fast after that. Family members reached out, pretending concern while fishing for details. Some tried to smooth things over. Others tried to pressure me. A few stopped calling altogether. I noticed who stayed silent and who finally spoke up. One message stood out, from my sister-in-law. "You're being cruel." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "No, I'm being honest." After that, something interesting happened. She changed, not in the way she expected me to. At the next family gathering, she was polite, careful, almost nervous. Compliments where there used to be sarcasm, warmth where there used to be superiority. But it was too late, because respect given out of fear is not respect, it's control. And I no longer needed either. As I drove home that night, I realized the real power hadn't come from taking anything away. It came from finally seeing my own value. I had smiled when she called my gift cheap. And now, quietly, without raising my voice or explaining myself to anyone who didn't deserve it, I was reclaiming everything that smile had cost me. The shift wasn't instantaneous, but it was undeniable. Family gatherings no longer carried the invisible weight of obligation. I arrived at the next one with a calm I hadn't felt in years. The rooms smelled the same: roast chicken, faint perfume, coffee. But this time I noticed the details rather than the judgments. The way sunlight hit the tablecloth, the subtle hum of conversation, the quiet moments between chaos. My sister-in-law approached first. Her smile was tighter than usual, polite, measured. She offered the small talk I had learned to navigate without swallowing my tongue. I nodded, returned a smile, and, most importantly, kept my boundaries. "You look well," she said, her eyes scanning me like she expected me to falter. "Thank you," I replied. "I feel well." It was the truth, and I meant it. The family's attention drifted, as it always did, but I noticed how they hesitated when they wanted something from me. The old patterns, the subtle nudges, the half-jokes that cut, the quiet pressures were gone, replaced by a kind of uncertainty. And that uncertainty was powerful. Later, when no one was watching closely, my sister-in-law lingered near the kitchen. "I didn't expect," she began, trailing off. "Expect what?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Her hands fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve. You're different. You're not the same person who used to..." She struggled, searching for words. "Let things slide." I nodded. "People change when they realize they deserve better." She looked down, embarrassed. I could see the recognition in her eyes, the acknowledgement that the hierarchy she assumed had been upended. She'd been operating under the belief that my compliance was guaranteed. Now it wasn't. For the first time, I noticed my father observing me from across the room. He smiled, not in a proud way, but in a soft, understanding one. A quiet nod toward me, as if he'd finally seen me, not the version of me everyone expected, but the real me. The night carried on. Conversations flowed differently. Questions came without hidden agendas. Laughter returned, gentle and unforced. I realized something profound. When you remove yourself from being a tool for someone else's approval, people either adjust or they step back. Most of them adjusted. A few left entirely, and I didn't mind. Days turned into weeks, and the pattern held. My sister-in-law reached out less with demands and more with neutral updates. She asked about life rather than expecting it to revolve around her concerns. And in a way I hadn't anticipated, our relationship became civil, functional, respectful. Not warm, not intimate, but for the first time in years, it felt safe. It was during a quiet Sunday morning, while reading on the porch with a cup of tea in hand, that it truly clicked. All the anger, all the frustration, all the small humiliations I'd endured, they had taught me something invaluable. Not about them, not about family politics, but about myself. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to be the one everyone could lean on while they discarded my feelings like trash. I had spent so long trying to meet expectations that weren't mine that I forgot what it meant to honor my own life. And now finally, I was doing that. That Sunday, I made a quiet vow. I would continue to engage with my family on my terms, not theirs. I would invest in relationships that honored my worth, not those that drained it. I would give generously, but only where it was appreciated and reciprocated. Later that week, a small package arrived on my porch. No note, just a delicate scarf inside. It wasn't expensive, it wasn't meant to impress, but it was thoughtful. I knew immediately it was from my sister-in-law's daughter, not her. A small, innocent gesture, free of expectation or manipulation. I smiled. I had learned something crucial. Kindness isn't a weapon, and revenge doesn't have to be cruel. The real power lies in clarity, in choosing where your energy goes and in refusing to let others define your value. As I held that scarf, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. Because for the first time, no one could make me small without my permission. And that alone was more satisfying than any shouted argument, any dramatic confrontation, any vindictive act I had imagined in the past. Life moved on. Quietly, steadily. People adapted, or they didn't. And I walked forward with a calm certainty, a kind of quiet authority that didn't demand recognition, yet was impossible to ignore. And I realized something else. The world doesn't need to see your victories to respect them. The world only needs to see that you've stopped giving away pieces of yourself to people who never cared to protect them. That realization, that was everything.